This episode is brought to you by BigMooseCoffeeCompany.co. Pals, greetings and welcome to another episode of Everything Endurance. It's great to have you here. Thanks for coming along once again. I don't know about you guys, but I've really been enjoying the experience over the last few weeks of being able to get one of these episodes out every week. So thank you. Thank you to you guys for being involved with that. I've hoped you've been finding the guests that we've been having along as inspirational as I have. I mean, in particular, we've had a lot of very positive feedback about the episode that we did with Laz Lake, which was a couple of weeks ago. If you haven't listened to the Laz Lake episode yet, go back and do it now. The guy was an absolute pleasure to talk to. He knows so much, not just about his race. It's not just about his personal history as a runner, which we go into, which I knew nothing about before. He knows the history of the area that the Barkley Marathons is in intimately, in a way that's just so interesting. The episode's like an hour and 20 minutes long, and I could comfortably have talked to him for 5 hours on the day. I just wish I'd had enough memory cards and he'd had enough time. But yeah, go listen, have fun with that. That was great fun to record, and just another example of what a privilege it's been to be able to speak to some of these absolutely awesome people. And it's been inspiring. I mean, for me, I hope it's been inspiring for you, but in a professional capacity, my connection to the world of adventure and ultra running and stuff is that, you know, I am a content creator, I'm a photographer, I'm a videographer, I'm a writer, I'll do your press, I'll do your PR. That's the side of things where I'm connected to the scene. But, you know, I've got a bit of a history as a runner. I've run a couple of marathons. I've done a multi-stage ultra. I've got a couple of other ultra races under my belt. And it has been impossible over the last few weeks to talk to the people I've talked to and to hear their stories and not feel like I've got to put my running shoes on again. So thank you to everyone that's been involved in this podcast in any way. I am now regularly logging runs on Strava for the first time in 2 years. I've got a long way to go. I'm only banging out the occasional 5k, but it's a start, and thank you for that. Speaking of inspirational guests, today's guest is a name that maybe you don't know yet, but you are definitely going to hear about in the future. Continuing with our theme of speaking to runners who've won some of BTU's races, the runner we're talking today came out to Namibia with us in November last year. That race is 5 days of hard running across the Namib Desert. The temperatures are wild. This year we were regularly between 45 and 50 degrees. We had one day where in the middle of the day we measured 55 degrees out on the middle of the course. And that's what these guys are powering through. Soft sand, rocks, they're camping, it's self-sufficient, they're carrying all their own kit. I mean, this is a tough race. Beautiful area, tough place to run. The runner we're going to speak to today arrived in Namibia, and we didn't know her name, so you know we don't really know her running form, and the first thing we hear is that she's never run an ultramarathon before. Not just not a multi-stage, but not an ultramarathon at all. And we, you know, that's fair enough. We've seen some very experienced runners pull off some absolutely incredible feats, but it puts it in the back of your head, we're just going to keep a bit of an eye on this person. And we definitely did keep an eye on her throughout the event, as she just threw the rulebook out the window and absolutely demolished the race. She was the first woman over the line. She was the first female athlete, and this is horrible to say but true, she's the first female athlete to ever win a stage outright on one of our events. It's such a relief for us to finally see that happen. Such a victory for her. We were so pleased. Also got the course record. So she now has the female course record for that race. Not a bad start to a career in ultra running, I am sure you'll agree. And we're going to talk to Kasia right from the start, you know, when she first became engaged with running, and she's got a great story behind why she wanted to race in the desert in the first place. We're then going to look at the point at which she signed up for this mammoth event, and you know, a lot of you out there will be able to sympathize with her position here and really, really feel what she's feeling. Some of you might be signing up for your first races at the moment, and this is just gonna be absolutely inspirational for you. She signed up at a point where she was 7 months pregnant, with her life seemingly in chaos around her, and pushed through and absolutely demolished all of her goals. And it's a really inspirational story. She's a really, really lovely person, and I know you're going to enjoy this episode. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kasia Orzechowska. For starters, I've got the pronunciation right there, haven't I?
Fairly close, acceptable. I'm very used to having it said wrong my entire life, so my bar is fairly low. But that's an honourable mention, Will.
Oh, thank you. I'll take an honourable mention. That's less embarrassing than I thought that would be. Do you want to pronounce it correctly, just so I can do better next time?
Kasia Orzechowska.
Oh, right. Okay. So I wasn't a million miles off. Just maybe too many hard sounds in there. All right, cool.
I do have to give you a hard time from spelling my name, though. I think quite a lot of the stage race reports, the name was wrong. I think he mastered it by the end, but...
Look.
I haven't got an easy name, I know.
Well, yeah, you haven't got an easy name, for starters. I'm English, and we're notoriously bad with other people's names, even though ours are often completely ridiculous. And you know what? It's hot, and I was tired in the desert.
Fair.
How can you say fair? You were running. I'm trying to make excuses. I was sitting in a 4x4 with aircon.
I saw you running sometimes to get some good shots, so.
Yeah, sometimes literally tens of meters at a time.
Still counts.
Yeah. Okay, well, you've just dropped me in it in front of all the listeners, in that, yes, we're going to be talking to Kasia today about the fact that she won the Desert Ultra last year, and I was covering that event, and I did repeatedly muck up her name throughout, even though she was one of the winners. And you know what, Kasia, you were too busy doing other stuff to be able to tell me at the time. This is on me. How are you?
I'm very well. Sort of seeing what life is like post-corona, I guess, as is everyone, / not quite post-corona, but definitely things here. I live in Austria, but I'm in Germany at the moment at my in-laws, and things are looking much, much better. So
post-corona almost feels like a weird thing to say.
I know.
In the UK, it's not feeling very post-corona yet, but, we're getting out and about more than we were. But yeah, different wherever you are in the world.
I'm hearing a lot about sort of the new normal and that sort of thing. So I think that's the new term.
Yeah. The realization that we've got to stop waiting to go back to normal.
Exactly.
There's no back.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, other than coronavirus, you're okay though, right?
Yes, I'm very well. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Look, we've obviously already dropped ourselves in the middle of the Namib Desert and started talking about that, but and I really want to set the scene for that, because if you're listening to this and you haven't read the description below, then we're talking to Kasia because she won the Desert Ultra last year. She set a new women's course record, having come into the event never having run an ultra before, let alone a multi-stage ultra in a desert where it was 50 degrees plus on most days. And that's pretty mind-blowing. But before we get into that mind-blowing sequence of events, let's go back a bit further. Where does running begin for you? And are you a runner? Is this your main hobby, main sport coming into this event?
I definitely think running's been something that's been with me since childhood. I mean, my dad was a runner. I started running with him when I was a kid. I think it's what kids do. They see their parents doing something, they want to do it as well. And I did run competitive track and field, sort of 1,500 meters, 3,000 meters, and when I was in high school. So I do have a background. I can't say I was a non-runner, even though it's funny how it takes a really long time for someone to very confidently say they're a runner. I sort of said, I run. But yes, now I am a runner, and I think I can now say I'm a lifelong runner.
Yeah, I think you get that now.
I think I'm allowed to say that now. But I actually kind of turned away from running. I think I didn't really get on well with sort of the competitiveness of running when I was in high school. It wasn't really my thing. So I sort of moved away from it, and then maybe came back to it as an adult, just for pleasure. So I got a bit into marathon running. I really enjoyed that. There was something really nice about running. Instead of on a track with an audience, it was running in a massive crowd of people, and just, you know, it was about running your race. It wasn't about anyone else. And that got me back to liking running. So I definitely have a background in running, but the ultra marathon thing, yes, Namibia was definitely my first and probably not my last.
Well, I'm glad we've got you started on something, but so were you, I mean, you talk about track and field earlier on and stuff, and you've done quite a lot of marathon running. It sounds like there's quite a lot of road running. I mean, people often find their way into ultras from more of a sort of outdoorsy, hill hiking, climbing kind of a background. Did you spend your time out in the hills as well?
I mean, I definitely grew up hiking as well. My dad was from a mountainous region of Poland. So he always liked to say he was sort of a mountain man. And genetically. So in my childhood, we always went hiking as a family. That was something we did. And I've continued doing that as when I was older. And if I'm honest, I think I got bored of road running. And so it kind of just seemed the natural thing to decide to run on terrain that was a little bit more interesting. And I think, you know, what can be more interesting than a desert? So I definitely find that a lot more interesting. And I think there's not really much going back to road running once you've really been able to run on some amazing terrain. So
I'd have to agree. And I don't want to say anything that's going to turn away anyone who's listening here who is strictly a road runner. I mean, fair play. If that's what you love, carry on doing it. But I can't, especially where I'm locked down, I'm right in the middle of a city and I'm not a driver. So it's been like 13 weeks since I've seen a significant amount of green. I've been living a road runner's life for the last few weeks, and I am ready to get out of a built-up area.
Yeah, it has a huge effect on your mood, I think. Like, and you realize when you can't do it anymore, just, you know, you miss it. You need it.
Didn't know what I had till it was gone. And there we go. It'll be back.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. So how did we then end up in the desert? When did the idea, and was it that you spotted the Desert Ultra and thought, hell yeah, I fancy going and doing that? Or had you decided maybe I'm going to do an ultra marathon somewhere?
So it actually goes back a fair bit further. So it was over 10 years ago, it was maybe 12 years ago now. I came across a book. I worked at a library at the time, and I came across a book written by a Canadian runner named Ray Zahab. And it talked about his journey into running. And it told a lot of different races that he'd done, but the one I remember the most is he talked about running across the Sahara. So this has now been made into a film, a documentary, just a really incredible journey. And then just somehow by chance, he was speaking at a local high school just after I'd read the book.
Oh, wow. So
I saw him speak. I spoke to him afterwards. And there was just something I knew. He'd run Badwater, I believe. And I was just so inspired by what he'd done. And I thought, yeah, one day I'll do that. It seemed like one of these life dreams that, you know, you'll try, but you might not ever do. And I just, over those 10 years, you know, I was busy. I was at university, and then I actually moved to England from Canada. And then I did medical school in England, and everything just didn't quite fall into place. But I always knew, and it was always going to be a desert ultra for some reason. I just always thought, that was where it was at for me. I'm not somebody who does well in cold temperatures, despite being from Canada, and, you know, cold temperatures are definitely not for me.
Where were those mountain jeans? Yeah,
I know, I guess. Yeah, I mean, give me a mountain in the summer, I'm there. I can handle harsh changes in weather, but harsh, like the Arctic and that type of thing, will never be for me.
We're not going to see you in Sweden then. I can assume that now. Right, fair
not
enough.
Unless you want to have, you know, I'll lose hands and feet, I think, to frostbite if I was to go. It's definitely not.
It's far too much paperwork if that happens now. We'll leave it. So you've decided, you've been carrying that idea for a long time. So what lined up? What changed and made you think, I'm going to do it now? It sounds like your life was pretty busy across that decade.
Yeah. I think it was quite a flurry of things. And I found myself in quite a difficult position where I'd left my job as a doctor in the UK, and was traveling with my husband in a caravan, which was an amazing trip. But then unfortunately, my dad suddenly passed away. And and he was the inspiration for my running from the very beginning. And then all of a sudden, and just at the end of our trip, we were meant to move to Vienna. And so suddenly my dad had passed away. I was unemployed and actually homeless. We hadn't found anywhere to live yet.
Oh my days.
And so it was, landing in Vienna, trying to sort of start a life there when I was grieving, just everything sort of all at the same time. And then I got pregnant. And it was just, everything was just up in the air, unknown, new, scary. And I just kind of, as so many times in my life before, I sort of came back to running as this one thing that was a constant and safe. And it was actually, I signed up for the Desert Ultra when I was 7 months pregnant.
Wow.
So, yeah. And, also with my dad, like, it was just, I knew if I thought about doing something for 10 years and then all of a sudden just seeing somebody just suddenly die, I thought, there's no value in waiting. I need to do this now. And then, financially, death insurance money and that sort of thing, I knew my dad would have been very happy for that money to go towards funding something that I've dreamt about doing for so long. So it all just fell together in a way. And it seemed, although an odd time when you're 7 months pregnant, it somehow just all came together. And I knew it was something I really had to do.
Well, isn't that fantastic? It's so strange, isn't it? And I've heard similar-ish stories from runners where I think people have this conception that if you're going to take on something as big as an ultramarathon, that it'll have to wait for a time in your life when things are quiet and stable and you've got the time and energy to put into it. So actually, more commonly, what I find when I speak to people about this is their lives are all over the place, and the ultra running, that training, is the little focal point in the middle. Is the thing that actually gives you stability and keeps you moving forwards, like a constant in your life where you can measure your little bit of progress each time as you're going and get these little wins and that it actually helps you through difficult periods. I
absolutely agree. Yeah.
No, it's okay. All I was about to say there was, I'm extrapolating. Do correct me if I'm wrong, but you haven't. So.
No, you're absolutely right. No, it's absolutely true. Yeah. And it's certainly the healthiest way to deal with some of these things. I think it's, there's other unhealthy ways of dealing with it. And I think being addicted to running is probably one of the better ones. So yeah. I'll take it.
It's a strange thing to say, but when I was training to do the Ice Ultra, sort of halfway through that training, my dad passed away. And I think there was an assumption. I got a lot of arm around the shoulder, and I think the feeling from people was, we'll understand if you're not going to do this big project now. And it's like, actually, you're crazy if you think I'm going to stop doing this now. Like,
probably became more important.
Yeah, because I knew he loved that I was doing it, and because I needed that consistency at the time. And yeah. So there you go. Well, I didn't know that before, Kasia, and I'm so glad to have been part of that positive experience for you, even if it was just jumping out from behind sand dunes taking photos of you, which sounds creepier than it is.
Yeah.
Well, so you've at 7 months pregnant, and against this backdrop of chaos going on behind the scenes in your life, you sign up for the Desert Ultra. So, I mean, you've banked on a lot there as well. Coming out, I'm 7 months pregnant at the moment. And how long did you have to go at that point to the Ice Ultra? You can't have been more than a year out.
That would have been 13 months.
13 months.
Yeah, 13 months.
Wow. Okay. So you committed to that point. I am going to be coming back from this pregnancy and hitting the ground running, literally.
Yeah. I mean, I did speak to Chris for before, just to make sure that if things didn't quite go right after the delivery and things like that I could defer for a year, which was kind of a good piece of information for me that, if I had to push back. But I think that was more assurance for my husband than it was for me. I think I was pretty dead so sure I was going to do it.
I hear you. And, I touched on this. We spoke to Sophie Power a while back, and one of the things we were talking about is races that don't allow deferrals due to pregnancy. I just can't follow it. I just don't get it. But yeah.
I'm serious. I would love to do the UTMB, but I think I'm seriously considering whether I will not do it because of their policies. Yeah. I think it's a very real possibility that I won't do it, but we'll see. It's shocking, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it just feels completely unnatural to me. But in any case, you did bounce back. That process went well, and your training evidently went well. So what did that year of preparation look like for someone who hasn't done an ultramarathon before? Like, how equipped were you coming into this, and what did you have to learn suddenly in that 13-month period?
So, I mean, I was very fortunate that my pregnancy was relatively uncomplicated. So I was actually able to run through my pregnancy. I wasn't pushing anything in any way, but I was certainly maintaining some degree of fitness throughout my pregnancy. I even managed, I think it was also about 7 months when I did a half marathon in Austria and got some very odd looks running with my massive belly, but I did get to the finish line. So, so I think I definitely had sort of a good background basis. And then unfortunately my son was born by emergency C-section. So that sort of threw things off a fair bit.
So now we're throwing surgery into the mix as well.
Yeah.
Nothing is uncomplicated about this so far.
Yeah. So I definitely had, after that happened, I just thought, I might need to do this deferral. We'll see. I did my first run 3 weeks after he was born, and I could barely do 2 kilometers. I was at least had the sense to listen to what was happening with my body. And then 2 kilometers was really the maximum I could do at that point. But I just sort of kept at it. Obviously there's becoming a parent is something entirely new. But again, like you said earlier about running being that central point, I think that was actually somewhat my savior, and getting out for however long, at the beginning it was super short runs. And then obviously my husband was with our son, but that was a bit of time for me. And then as he was getting more and more able to, between longer chunks of time between breastfeeds and sleeping a bit better, I was able to start lengthening my run. So it all kind of naturally worked together in a way. And then actually most of my training would end up being late at night. I know there's lots of people that run super early in the morning. That doesn't really work for me. So I was doing runs well at night, past midnight sometimes. And that sort of worked for me.
It doesn't sound like there's a lot of sleep through this period of time at all.
I sort of think that I think there's those first 3-4 months with a baby where actually that's the case, whether you're running or not, you're not sleeping a lot. And I think maybe in some way using the time when I could to run actually just made me sleep better when I could sleep. And it worked somehow. I certainly ran with him in the stroller sometimes as well, to varying degrees of success. Also because it was winter in Vienna, which can be quite harsh, but we just somehow cobbled it together and it worked. And then in terms of, not having done an ultra marathon, like I sort of, especially as I started looking into what I needed to do for equipment and food, and I just sort of realized this was actually much bigger than I realized when I signed up. There's a lot of elements that, you have to think about. And I think most of my sort of research was often done at night whilst breastfeeding or putting him to sleep, or, I'd be on my phone reading up stuff. So it was definitely a massive part of my life, and my husband's life, where he didn't have much of a choice for those months.
It's an extremely steep learning curve if you're just coming into it for the first time. And I mean, I don't know, I was really taken aback when I first went into it that I'd expected my year of training up to my first multi-stage to be more about my legs and, and about getting physically fit and getting my nutrition down, and was really blown away from how much of my time was actually spent reading about the weights of various pieces of camping equipment and trying on different shorts and trousers and bits and bobs, and buying kit and having to send it back because it wasn't quite fit for purpose, and the amount of research around it. I'd signed up for an Arctic race as well, so it really was a nightmare of buying different bits and bobs of down layers and stuff. But it is a lot to learn. Did you find that it was difficult to find those resources?
To be honest, I think most of my resources ended up being via Instagram. You mentioned Sophie, but that was a big one that actually she had a lot of things that she endorsed or just genuinely said she used. And I thought, well, I'll give that a go. So she was actually really a big part of that for me. And that sort of just sprouted off into other things via Instagram that worked for me. And It's a late night Instagram scrolling while I was breastfeeding. And then it was trial and error to a degree as well. In terms of the foods, I think I realized everyone says you just have to see what works for you. And I think that's the hard thing with it, is you kind of want one definitive answer, but actually it's individual. So you kind of need it's a bit of test and trial, and then hope that you've gone with the best thing for the actual race.
Yeah.
And I was making an amendment until the moment I handed my bag over to you guys. I was still sort of not sure about my kit and thinking, should I have this or this? I think I did some swap outs of some of my foods totally at the last minute and dumped some meals at the end. It's a bit of guesswork, I think. Obviously experience helps, and
kit check will test your confidence. Suddenly you're surrounded by a group of people who are either the people who are standing there with checklists judging you on what you've picked directly, or other runners who are taking a sneak peek in your pack to see what you've brought along. And it's impossible not to then look around at everyone else's kit and go, oh, I did think about those shoes, and oh no. Did you find it was like that for you, or were you quite settled on your kit?
No, I don't think I was settled at all, if I'm honest. Like I actually, in retrospect, realized although I'd done a lot of planning and research and trials with different types of foods, I actually didn't really pack my bag together until maybe a week or two before. I think I did 2 runs with my pack, and realized very early on, when people were talking about doing like runs with the bag, test runs before with your bag, that was not my experience, and it was fingers crossed it was going to work for me. So
how did that pack work out for you in the end?
I mean, my back was covered in blue tape after day 1, I think.
Yeah, I did kind of know that when I asked the question. I remember quite a lot of K-tape going missing when you first went to see the medics.
Yeah, definitely. So it's also like, I think even the times I ran with it in Vienna at home, I kind of just shoved a few random things in it. So actually it wasn't really a reflection of how heavy my bag actually was going to be. And in the end, I think I weighed it was 9.5 kilos before I put any water in, which I know some of the others were in at like 5 and 6 kilos. And I thought, oh shit, like, and I'm only little.
That's a percentage of your body weight as well. That's a really sturdy bag you were carrying. I hadn't realized that at all.
Yeah, it was way too heavy. But I even after ditching some things, I just thought, I really don't know what else to get rid of. And just banked on the fact that obviously as I ate my food, my pack would get lighter. But I think as you get more tired, you actually don't feel the weight off your bag anymore. So.
No, yeah, you can tell yourself that it's there, but yeah, the cumulative effect of days running out in the desert. So for the benefit of anyone who's listening to this thinking, oh, bloody hell, I'm just getting started on this ultra running business. What's the training like for someone who's gone out there and won run? What was a week like for you on the run up to this event? So if we say we've gone past the point where you're feeling your way back into running from the pregnancy and you've got your legs back now, what does a week's training look like for you on the run into the Desert Ultra?
So I was quite loyal with and consistent with long runs on a Monday. That was always for me. And I definitely later on started doing sort of double runs. So I'd run in the morning and I'd run in the evening. And then I think some weeks I only managed 2 more runs in addition to that long Monday run, sometimes 3, not a lot more. So now like I've started working with a coach as of the beginning of June, and I'm running a lot more now that I have a formal coach, and I'm realizing that maybe back then I wasn't maybe training as would be expected. Obviously it worked somehow for me.
Yeah, it obviously did.
But I think also I've thought about it a lot, and why, how was I able to end up, winning the race. I think one of the really big elements that worked for me in my favor was also that I'm hugely otherwise active. And I mean, my son wasn't very good in the stroller, so I was constantly carrying him. So he was and he was getting heavier and heavier. He was a very small baby, but it was kind of incremental. So as I was getting more fit, he was getting heavier. And I was carrying him around everywhere. And I'm not generally a person that does well with sitting still for too long. So I was constantly out, and I had dogs, so I was going walking with the dogs, and I was on the move a lot. So although I was only running so many times a week, I was moving a lot.
It all counts. We talk about time on feet being key in the run into an event like this. Yeah,
absolutely. And also my son, I think we sort of trained him to this, but he sort of needed, if you will, us to do squats and lunges to get him to sleep. So I think there's some day where cumulatively I may have done 2 hours of squats and lunges. So it's all those little things I think that contributed to sort of being physically prepared for the ultra.
Yeah, and you did seem to be. I mean, you from the outside watching you run, it looked like you'd done exactly what a runner wants to do, which is hit the right place at the right time. You come off your training not looking fatigued from the amount of training, but looking very strong. Is that how you felt towing the line for the first time?
I can't stress enough how terrified and underprepared I felt at the beginning.
Because had you been, let's strip this back a little bit, like had you been traveling in that area of Africa before, for instance? Or was all of this new? I traveled, I'd spent a fair bit of time in East Africa, sort of quite a while ago now, sort of 2006, 2007. And traveled a fair bit around there, but I'd been to South Africa a couple of times as well. Yeah. Never to Namibia. And never really in such a vast desert. That was sort of the first time I'd been in a proper desert region. But if I'm honest, I think it was about 8 weeks before the Desert Ultra, I decided to run the Berlin Marathon, thinking it was, I'm hitting those kinds of distances. It'll be nice to do it with some more company than usual. But I think I just got wrapped up in the enthusiasm of it, and I think I just pushed it a bit too hard, and then I ended up getting a really bad knee, and then I ended up seeing physios, some great physios, a really great sort of physio running analyst guy who oddly enough is from Scotland but lives in Austria. And got some great help from them. But it turned out that my glutes, which I think is not uncommon for a lot of runners, my glutes were super weak. I basically was not using my glutes to run. Oh. So I was getting tight calves. I was, I had IT band problems, hence the knee. And 8 weeks to go before the ultra, I had quite a lot of training that I was hoping to do. And all of a sudden I had to scale it back to virtually 10K runs for those at a time. So I wonder actually if maybe some of that rest worked in my favor, but that knocked my confidence massively. And so going into the ultra, I genuinely had concerns that I wasn't going to be able to complete it. And that if my knee went like it did during the Berlin Marathon, that actually I was going to have to withdraw. So, I was getting really anxious, and my husband was running through it with me thinking, right, even if you walk, this is how long it'll take you. You can still finish, and I knew I would have been devastated if I'd had to withdraw. So actually I went in it genuinely just wanting to finish it. That was the goal. So obviously it turned out quite differently. It did a little, yes.
Yeah. But I mean, the first day I think I ran really conservatively because I felt good, but I thought I need to be smart about this. And then at the end of the first day, I think I was 8th overall or something, and was really chuffed to sort of be, in the top third of runners. And I thought, yeah, okay, let's see how this goes. I felt absolutely brilliant after the first day and thought, I think I can push it a little bit more. And things just felt good. So there was no reason not to. And I think my confidence started coming up a little bit.
I mean, looking at it from the outside, you could see that as the week went on, the sort of growing realization that I'm doing all right here. Yeah. This isn't as bad as I thought it would be at all.
Yeah.
That first day, though, that would be the first ultra distance you'd done on that first day. So having crossed the finish line at the end of that day, boom, first ultra marathon under your belt. That's a big learning experience. Like, what did you pick up over the course of that day? Because that would be the first time you'd really experienced running in that temperature. And my God, we had a hot year for it. Like we were looking, 50 degrees was just what you expected at midday on most of the days.
I think it was at the third day. I think it hit 55 or something, didn't it, on the third day, I think?
Yeah, and it was unrelenting on that day.
Yeah, I remember the shade being like, you're sitting like lying in the shade and you felt like you were in a sauna. It was intense.
Very little breeze until you got a good sort of halfway along the course too. Yeah, difficult. But so yeah, how was that first day? How did you find those conditions? Was the heat kicking your ass at all? It didn't look like it was.
I don't, for whatever reason, I do quite well in the heat, and I did know that about myself. Like I've always sought out. I mean, I think everyone seeks out sun and heat on holiday, but I especially seem to be quite tolerant of it. So that from that aspect, I actually think that was perhaps one of my advantages over some of the other runners, is that I was able to manage the heat well. And I don't have any secrets. I don't have any tips really, other than drink water. But I think some of it is just down to luck. But I think that first day I just couldn't stop grinning really, because it's, you put all this work in, years, months, whatever, of preparation, of thinking about it, and all of a sudden you're there, and it's, this is what you've been training for, and that's the highlight. That's the fun bit. That's the funnest bit, So I was just over the moon that I was able to be there and finishing the first day, feeling good. The atmosphere and the participants. I've never done an ultra, so I know I'd heard about this great sort of group of people that are really supportive, and God, is it true? And it's just an amazing atmosphere to be in, not to mention even the amazingness of being in the Namibian desert. So,
well, I'm glad you thought so. I mean, we think we're quite nice people. No, it is. There's nothing like it, and there's a reason I continue to do what I do, and it is the atmosphere on those races, and on every ultramarathon I've really had contact with is fantastic. It's a very positive feeling generally. Well, amazing. How had your kit worked out for you then? Because we talked about, really, when you sign up for an event like this, if you sign up for it 13 months out, you're signing up for that race, but you're signing up for a year-long experience of working towards that event. The event itself is like the icing on the cake. This is the reward you get at the end of it. But all that research that you'd done all the way through those 13 months, did you come out of that first day thinking, yeah, I've got my kit right, I can stop worrying about that?
I think for the most part, yes. I mean,
apart from your back, a bit.
Apart from the back and the backpack and the weight, yes. But in terms of the food, I definitely I knew that in extreme heat like that, eat something wrong, and GI problems, I think, is one of the big reasons people withdraw or aren't able to finish. So I'd put, I suppose, quite a fair bit of emphasis on that. I actually wonder as well if perhaps the large amounts of food I was having to consume whilst breastfeeding was actually working in my favor as well. I've never eaten so much in my life, and drinking water as well. So I was I think my body's equipped to take on that much food. I mean, I think sometimes, I kind of think in the ultramarathon, one of the big differences of how you do it ends up being how much you can eat. It's kind of an eating contest almost over 5 days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of fuel to get your body through that many kilometers. And if you can't get the fuel in, you're not going to get the performance out. No. And it's really, it can spiral really quickly. As soon as you don't feel well, you don't want to eat, and then you get more unwell, and it just spirals downhill from there. So I was really good at being on top of my nutrition. I was eating very often. I was taking in, I think, about 4,000 calories, 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day, quite a lot. It's probably still not meeting the amount of calories I was burning, but enough that I felt good. I was able to keep it down. I think that's another really big factor in how things go, is I was able to keep it down. So from a food perspective, I felt my kit was okay. Other than the backpack, I think in terms of, what I had on me was working really well. I had gaiters that were working for me. That was a big thing as well, is getting gaiters that, that was potentially could spell the end for people as well.
Amazing
Absolutely.
what one grain of sand can do.
Yeah, I think we don't see an awful lot of it, but some runners, the gaiters feel like a bit of an afterthought, and they'll just go and get something off the peg that sort of fits with their trainers, and that'll be all right because it says gaiters on it, and then you just get a little bit of sand in your shoes, and 50 kilometers later, when your feet are sweating as horribly as they're going to be like that, and you've created a mess, an absolute mess. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I with the gaiters, mine were ones. It was a funny little company from South Africa. I can't remember how I got onto them, but I didn't really realize that there's other companies that just routinely make gaiters. I thought it was some sort of random piece of kit. So I found this company in South Africa where I had to sort of email somebody, and it's quite a funny little experience. And then
and now, thanks to the sort of long-term thriving of the MDS, there are these little cottage businesses here and there dotted around that just make sand gaiters.
Yeah, it was amazing. I think I was emailing with the woman who sewed them and sent them. Like, I think it was a one-woman operation.
Brilliant.
But they were ones that were designed to have the Velcro actually sewn onto your shoe. And I think it was a few days before flying that I was running around Vienna trying to find a cobbler that could stitch this Velcro onto my shoes, and had several of them say, nope, can't do it. And then finally I found somebody who said, yeah, I can do it for next week. And I thought, no, I need them by tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, he did to his credit, he did actually do them for me, and they worked brilliantly. So
you owe that guy a day.
Absolutely. And you're right, I forgot about that. I'll do that next week.
Well, if he's listening, you've got a beer coming your way, mate. But,
yeah.
So, start line, you're standing there thinking, God, I just hope I'm going to make this. By the end of day one, you've realised, all right, I've come in the top 10 and I'm feeling all right here. When did things start to change? Because I'm not going to skip ahead. But we know, I've mentioned it in the blurb, so I'm not ruining anything here, that by the end of this, you're going to come out with, yeah, no, so I just realised people already know by this point. I'm not giving anything away, but, by the end of the race, things have gone really, really well for you. So where did things start to tip? Where did you start thinking, I'm going to push now?
I think it was actually you guys when, I can't remember if it was you or Chris first mentioned that I was not far off the course record. So, I mean, I know either day 2 or 3, I was running with Mile, one of the French runners, and he said, we're 3rd and 4th right now. And I thought, what do you mean? And he's like, no, we are, because you're so far apart from other runners, and you so often are, you see literally no one around you, that you lose sight of where you are in the pack. And actually you're also just focused on immediately, one foot in front of the other, that everything else, it sort of doesn't matter. But I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. And then you guys mentioned the course record, and I think I'm still quite a few hours off of it, but I just thought, okay, well, let's see. I think at first I didn't really want to know. I think that was also kind of this sort of athletics competitive background that I didn't really like, that I thought, I don't know if I really want to do that, but was just way too curious not to go, yeah, all right, tell me. Come on, tell me. So, and then once I had the numbers in my head, I sort of thought, I might as well give it a go. And if I don't manage it, then I've still finished, or I've still tried, or, it was, but I certainly, once it became more and more possible, as I sort of gaining time on it and thinking this might actually happen, there was definitely a point, definitely by the end of the 4th day, when I knew I just had that one last day, where I thought, yeah, let's do this. And I want this now. I knew I did really want it at that point.
And along that way, I know I've said before, from the outside, every time I saw you during the race, it just looked like you were having a great time. I genuinely was. This is the thing. Well, I'm glad to hear it. But, it didn't look like it was having a terrible toll on you. It's not often I get through an event and I haven't sat down with a runner at least once at a low point for them. You usually see it. Were there any that I just missed? Like, were there tough times through those few days, or did everything just line up?
There's definitely, I think there were small, tough points maybe every day. There's points where you just think, I'm just so bloody tired, I want to stop. And it's, I was doing a lot of sort of talking and swearing at myself at certain points of each day's run. I just think, just keep going. So there was like small elements of that, which I think would be very unusual to not have some of those moments. I think it is those pushing past those moments is really what makes ultramarathon what it is as a sport. It's
absolutely,
but there was definitely on the last day I had I got some really bad pain in one foot. I think it was one of the first or second checkpoint, second maybe, and just really, really bad foot pain. And I was a mess. I think at that point, obviously physically you're pushing the limits, but actually I think at that point emotionally you're kind of stripped back to the basics, and I felt really emotionally raw and very delicate. And when my foot started hurting, I just everything started spiraling, and I thought, I can't finish. I've got this far and now I can't finish. And I definitely had a low moment at that checkpoint. And, the exile medics, who I'm convinced perform miracles, managed to sort of sort things out.
We know they do. We've seen it.
It's incredible. Yeah. And then I know Adam got involved with trying to sort my foot out a bit, and, got some painkillers on board and went on from there. But that was definitely the worst low point, where I genuinely just could not see. I think that was 20K in, and I knew I had 70 plus more kilometers ahead of me. And I just, having never run that distance, I'd done the 50s during the first few stages, but the 90 plus kilometers was terrifying. And to have the amount of pain I was having at that 20 kilometer point, I found that absolutely devastating.
I guess that, having seen it a lot from the outside, I've seen some runners come into checkpoints in a state where you think euthanasia is the only hope. There is, this person is not going to progress out of this checkpoint. And emotionally it takes such a toll on you, especially you're now 4 days into calorie deficit and exhaustion, and sleeping on a thin sleeping bag in the middle of the desert with rocks underneath you, and it takes a lot out of you. And you hadn't really hit that point before in a race. This is the thing that makes it even more amazing, that you were doing this. You were now at the start of your 5th day, having in the last 4 days run your first ever 4 ultramarathons, and then you hit this low, this end of the world low. And it is incredible that you can overcome that and come out the other end of it. I'm always blown away by how absolutely, definitely finished runners can look. And 20 minutes later, with some painkillers, you can send them back on their way again. That's to completely undermine what exile medics do as a team, because they are absolutely astonishing. But those incredible emotional lows and getting over them are a big part of what ultra running is about. A big part of what the challenge actually is maybe not knowing when you're finished.
Yeah. And I think it's also one of the reasons, I was really surprised when I met all the other runners that, I think there was only 2 of us maybe that had never done one before. Everyone else had done several. Some of them had done 10s and 50, so many ultra marathons that, they're repeat customers.
Of course, yeah. You'd have had Isabel. She's done like hundreds of them. Carl, who's... I don't think he does anything else. Yeah, it must have been an intimidating sounding field as you went into it.
Oh, absolutely. I felt completely naive, and like I was going to be outed as this naive, ignorant person in the ultra world, but it certainly wasn't the case. But I definitely think those lows and overcoming those lows is why people get hooked, why they get addicted and come do them again and again and again. And I think it's a skill that actually it's impossible for it not to have an impact on the rest of your life, on everything that you do. It's once you've overcome those lows, it's nothing can stand in your way anymore. And I think that's what's really powerful about the sport.
Agreed. Also, I'll be pulling that clip out as the bit that we use to advertise this podcast. That was on the money. If I'd have wanted to script a quote from you at the end of this podcast, that would have been it. So thank you very much. Okay. Now, I had a quick look through the last race report that I wrote just before we started this, and I'd written in there that on that night before, and that's stupid for a start saying on the night before the last stage. We're probably talking at about 10 p.m. when our alarms were set for about 2:30 a.m. the next day. But somewhere that evening, as we watched the sun go down around camp, either me or Chris had told you exactly how much time there was between where you were and where you needed to be to get the course record. And I'm going to take a second here just to put some perspective on that. The person who had the course record previously hadn't gone into it looking to, set a massive course record, but is a world record breaking runner who we've had on this podcast before. She runs for Denmark. She is an exceptional athlete. And we were coming to you at the end of your fourth ultra, and you've got this 92 kilometer monster ahead of you. And I remember having a bit of a conversation about, should we tell her? Because we obviously wanted you to know, because it looked like you could do it. You looked so good at that point, like, we've got to give her this information. But then we were like, yeah, but if we tell her and she overcooks it, and suddenly you feel like there's this responsibility. So I remember us finally telling you, look, Kasia, you've got 40 minutes. If you can get 40 minutes, you're going to do this. And you had a 90 kilometer stage ahead of you and a 4 a.m. start. So what was that like? Once we dropped that mind bomb on you and put you on the start line in the dark the next day, where were you emotionally then?
I definitely got very little sleep that night. I remember lying in the tent just thinking, not being able to sleep. At one point I was lying there, couldn't sleep, and then I got hungry and I didn't want to wake up my tent mate getting some bar out. Sorry. So I actually got out of the tent and stood under the stars and ate my bar. And it's a moment I'll always remember. And I just remember having this little pep talk with myself that, like, this is a really good moment. It would be incredible, but it's not the be all end all. And, just do what you can. And, really giving myself a little pep talk. I think there was a little bit of influencer from my dad coming at me there as well. He was a big fan of my running. And yeah, so I think, although exhausted at the start of that last day, I think everyone was, though it was a very early start, but I think I was in the right mind space for what was coming at me, I think.
Amazing. So 92 kilometers. Talk us, what was that last stage like? And I guess we haven't really talked about this up to now. Like, we haven't talked about the scenery or what the terrain that you were running over was like. But that fifth day is perfect, because I think it comes with a little bit of everything that you've had before. So what were you experiencing out there in the middle of Namib?
So I think you have no other way to do it other than sort of break it up into chunks. So certainly, there's the very beginning to the first checkpoint, sort of a scramble up this dune in the dark. And that's definitely a distinct part of that day. But I remember sort of being in the brief, we were sort of told that you go up the dune, which I think was 5 kilometers maybe. It wasn't very long, but it was quite a slog.
4.5, 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
All up.
That was really tough. I think I was, if I'm honest, I think I was walking most of that. It was just you couldn't really see where you're going because it's dark. All you've got is the truck in the distance with his light on, and you think it's getting closer, and then all of a sudden you look and it seems like it's further, and because you're going a bit down and a bit up, and it's a lot of sort of ups and downs, disappointments, thinking you're closer than you actually are, but we were told in the briefing that once you get to the top there, that from there on, it's mostly downhill and that it becomes quite packed sand. So getting to the top, it wasn't really packed sand. So I think Chris said he reckoned it was been a bit of a sandstorm, had blown over this, what used to be, or had in previous years been quite a compact path, had become just deep sand again. Yeah. And it certainly was not. It wasn't really, there was still quite a lot of uphill at that point with the deep sand. So I think at that point, quite a few of us were sort of thinking, Chris, we're going to have words with you. So that was quite tough. And then there definitely is a point where, you've got a marathon behind you and you've still got 50K in front of you, which is just a really bizarre feeling. But I agree with you when you say, like, that day is the day where you really do get to see so much of the scenery. There's times where I think it's, I feel like a lot of my memories of that day are a little bit hazy just because you're quite tired and quite hot. But there's certainly the parts I remember being sort of in like a valley where you've got steep cliffs on either side of you, and it's I mean, it's
I know
an
exactly
oven.
what you mean. Yes,
It's an absolute
it
oven.
is a sauna in there. But it's stunningly beautiful.
It's beautiful, you know, and then you're running down, it's a riverbed, isn't it? And you're sort of, you get some bigger stones that you're sort of jumping from stones where you're just kind of hoping your legs don't give way.
Yeah.
But it's the variation you see over the 92 kilometers. And I think the exhaustion plays a part in your whole experience of it. But it's a humbling feeling to realize you've covered those kilometers on foot. You know, it's unlike anything else. And it's certainly nothing you ever forget. Like I'll never forget that day. That was an immense day for me. No,
well, I'm so glad to hear that. And it is, there's something very, very special about that area and about that stage. I always have loved it. But that last sort of 10-kilometer stretch that's very technical, very steeply downhill as you go into the valley, and the rhino sanctuary down there as well, I think it's just an absolutely beautiful area. Did you still have the energy to appreciate that while you were on the way into the finish?
I think I did. I think at that point, it's really managing your emotions where you're getting really excited that you're near the end, but you've also, you know, thinking, because I know Adam came and ran the last 3 kilometers with me. He was the race director then. And
he was so excited.
Yeah. He's actually, I've recently, he sent me the video recently because he took a video of me running in that last little portion there. It was really exciting, especially, you know, right now sort of living in lockdown where the idea of traveling to the Namibian desert seems like a really odd thought, but it was really great to watch that video and see myself running in that last stretch. But it was, you know, trying not to get ahead of yourself about the fact that you're nearly there, because you're nearly there, but actually 3 kilometers when your legs are feeling like they do, is actually quite a long distance. And I was really grateful that he came and met me. Well, for several reasons, was grateful that he ran those last 3K with me. But one reason as well is I actually didn't have a GPS watch, so I had no idea where I was on the route in any way. Like obviously the checkpoints were helpful.
Yeah.
But leaving that last checkpoint, you know, I was kind of judging, okay, how fast do I think I'm running? Roughly, what's the distance to the finish? But I think at that point, my brain wasn't really functioning properly. So I kind of thought 20 minutes, no, 30 minutes. And then I kept sort of jumping all over the place and didn't really know where I was at. So when Adam came and met me, I was like, how far? Just please tell me how far and keep me updated.
And you've got to be worried there, because if you see me coming, you know you've got to be within about 300 meters of base camp, because I'm not going to go that far. But if it's Adam Kimball running towards you, you could still be a half marathon out easily.
Exactly.
No, it must have been good news when you found out you'd only potted 3K up the valley to see you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Also, it's cruel, really. Any idea of mathematically figuring out what your pace has been is out the window, because that last stretch is so technical and so winding, you couldn't figure it out for yourself if you wanted to.
Absolutely.
Okay. How did it feel then? Crossing that finish line. Yeah, did you know as you crossed the line that you'd made up enough time? Because you won that stage overall, for starters, which is incredible, and the first woman on any of our races to win a stage. We hadn't had that before, and that was a really big moment for us. We were so happy. What did it mean to you?
Actually, the fact that I think it's like you said, it was the first time a female had won any of the stages outright. I think that's actually the bit that I'm the most proud of, if I'm honest. I think that's my main bit that I'm proud of. But it's an incredible feeling. I mean, so you asked if I knew that I'd got the course record. Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is like I said, I didn't have a GPS watch, but I'd bought just before I flew. So basically, I have an old GPS watch. The battery's shit on it, so I thought I'm not going to bother trying to charge it, etc. And I just wanted to enjoy it, so I bought just a basic watch just to have the time, so I could see the time. But I had it on Vienna time, not on Namibia time.
Right.
So one of the other runners had changed the time for me on my watch. So when I finished and I was looking at the maths of how many hours I'd been running, I thought, I haven't done it. But I'd forgotten that this other runner had changed the time on my watch. So actually I had done it. So
no way.
I was a bit unsure. So I mean, I crossed the finish line, overjoyed to see that finish line. I know Louisa came running at me, massive hug. I swore I didn't cry, and then she played me the video back, and I can see, yes, I sobbed for a little while. But it was a hugely emotional moment. And then, yes, when the news came through that, I did get the new course record. I mean, I was overjoyed, and then I got a cold beer in my hand, and I mean, really, life doesn't get any better than that. It was pretty amazing.
You know, quite a lot of planning goes into being able to keep those beers refrigerated for 5 days across when it's 50 plus degrees every day. Impressive. Yeah, because there's nowhere to go. Everything we have, everything you eat or drink or whatever, has been carried with us since we set off at the start of that event. So the race team carry those drinks for you.
Now that you've announced that, you can't ever get rid of those cold beers, because you'd have a massive revolt on your hands. So you've committed for every run from now to have those cold beers at the end.
All right. Well, if there's any Namibian beer companies out there that are thinking of sponsoring an event, then we'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
Mega. Well, what was next? I know you ended up with a bit of a flurry of media attention afterwards, didn't you?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, I mean, it was funny because obviously, thank you. I mean, all of this happened in a bubble where, you obviously don't have any access. There's no social media. You're just in this bubble. And so I remember when we were in the bus on the way back, I turned my phone on, I think my data on or something. And, I got through all of these, my WhatsApp was hundreds and hundreds of messages from family and friends, including them telling me that there'd been an article in a Polish news source about my run. And I was absolutely blown away. Obviously this stuff is happening as you're running. You kind of feel like when you're in the desert running that everything else just stands still. But of course it doesn't. And so I was utterly shocked. And then, afterwards there was, a few little things that came in, and some interviews and some running magazines. And I was invited onto a Polish breakfast TV show.
I didn't know about that one.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So, and actually now it would have been the last flight that I did before everything shut down. So that was in January. And yeah, so there was this sort of interest in what I'd done. And I think a big feature of that often featured was the fact that I had a baby fairly recently. I think that's quite a hot topic in sport and for women at the moment is motherhood does not spell the end of what you want to do with your life. Kind of a slow realization considering it's 2020, but yes, that's the case. And yeah, so it was an odd time to, it's certainly not media and stories and things like that is not something that I'm particularly comfortable with, but it was really, really, I was really honored to have people interested in what I had done. And then it also was like right after the run, and my family, my son and my husband had actually flew out, and we'd done a holiday in Namibia. So it was also, we'd had this sort of like bubble with no social media. And then also when we were traveling it was about 3 weeks around Namibia, we also didn't have much access to internet. So it was just like kind of coming in small spurts of when we had a little bit of internet connection. So it wasn't really until we got back home to Vienna that I kind of managed to sort of get back to some of these people. And it just, it just meant, I mean, I think what I enjoyed most about it was the fact that this amazing moment for me in Namibia, I kind of got to retell it obviously to my family and friends, but also it kind of got dragged down onwards for several months. And then obviously now I'm really honored to speak to you about it. It's a really nice experience to get to relive it a little bit. And
well, there's no need to be honored. We should have called you immediately, and that's very remiss of us, but we're obviously now in a place where we've got an awful lot of time. Is that a source of pride for you there, really, that what your story there of being 7 months pregnant and this backdrop of chaos in your life and making this decision, and 13 months down the line, what you got in that valley in the middle of Namibia was absolute vindication that you were right to make these decisions, you were right to focus on this thing, and that coming from that negative looking backdrop, a backdrop that doesn't scream this person's going to win a multi-day ultra marathon in 13 months, you did do that. That must be very inspirational for a lot of people.
I hope so. And I mean, and I know for a fact that, for instance, my sister shortly afterwards signed herself up for a triathlon. and completed that. So it sort of inspired her to do that. And actually my nephew just this weekend who's 10 years old, just did his first half marathon. So obviously it was a lockdown. So it's absolutely sub 2 hours as well. So just immense. She planned, because everything's locked down in Canada and everything's still quite closed. She planned a route around his friends' houses, and it was just this, it obviously, he was inspired to run, but then all of his friends have now seen him run, and it's, it just has this effect on people. And I, if I can have a small bit that just kind of that last little bit of encouragement to get somebody to do something they've been thinking about doing, then, I'm really chuffed.
Well, let's hope there's even more of that after people have listened to this episode. I've no doubt there will be. Somebody is going to be listening to this bit right now, getting up off their sofa thinking, I'm getting my trainers. This is happening.
Sign up. That's the first step, I think. Yeah.
Well, obviously at this stage of the podcast, I'd usually be saying to people, hey, so what's next? But we're in the middle of a lockdown, so what's next is a bit of a different question from usual. But we did talk just before this. You do have a race coming up soon, don't you? So
I do. So this is hot off the press. It's a couple of days ago.
This is you committing to it. So
yeah,
be
said
ready.
It now, haven't I?
Yeah.
So I mean, I had a few races picked out for this year, and like everyone, they've been cancelled for good reason. But there is one I didn't expect any runs to come up, but I was emailed about a 24-hour run on the first weekend in July in Austria. So, and it qualifies as an Austrian championship. So I'm running through an athletics club that I joined in Vienna, and we shall see.
24 hours. Is it
yes.
track?
No, it's a 1.8 kilometer loop. So thinking about it, I suspect it's largely mental as well, because you're running in loops, hundreds of loops. So actually, if it was on a track, that would be, I think, even harder. So I'm quite grateful it's not. But yeah, it's new territory for me. I've never run for that many hours. But I'm really excited. I think in some ways the lack of sleep will be okay. We'll just have to see how my legs, it's obviously, having just found out about it a couple of days ago and it being in less than 2 weeks. I have not trained for it specifically, but I think we'll see.
Well, given your propensity in the past for turning up at races seemingly completely unprepared and then smashing them to pieces, I've got a bright future pictured for you in a couple of weeks' time.
Thanks, Will.
I mean, as bright as it can be when you're running 24 hours around a small loop. Bits of it is still going to be tough, but that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so Adam Kimball is training you now.
He is my coach. As of the beginning of June, he's now my coach. And I'm really enjoying coaching. I did think about it after Namibia, and I took a little while for me to sort of percolate on the idea. And Adam seemed like an obvious choice. He'd seen me run, and he's, as you well know, he's a really enthusiastic.
Yeah, possibly the happiest man I've ever met. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's contagious. So,
yeah.
But yeah, he seemed like an obvious choice, and he was very happy to take me on. And I think it was a very, very good decision. And, I don't think I've told him, but I am running more now than I think I ever have. I certainly didn't run like this when I was preparing for the Desert Ultra, but,
well, he'll be pleased to hear it, I'm sure. I mean, for anyone who's listening to this that has considered that, 'cause I know it's a question. I think you come to a point in your running where you think, how much more am I going to progress just with my own knowledge base and just with my own motivation? Like, am I going to get more out of having a trainer? You're in the early days of it now, but are you feeling like, I'm really glad I did this?
I'm really glad. And actually, if I'm honest, I wish I'd done it earlier. So it's, I have a background in running, so it's, I feel like I wasn't coming at it with no knowledge. I had some knowledge, but there's also, the side of thing, I get my schedule and I do what I'm told. And so there's, those days where I want to go for a run but I should do something else, and I need to do something else. And actually I'm a little tired, and all of these elements that play into in your mind when on any given day, all of a sudden it's like, no, I have to run this much today. I'm going to do it. And you just think, you're not thinking if, you're just thinking when exactly is it going to fit and work in my day, and you make it work. And there's obviously that accountability. There's the support. So, I mean, I had a funny moment with the 24-hour run where I had to think, do I need to ask his permission? And then I thought, no, no, he's my coach. So, but and then obviously that works into your training as well. And it's just somebody on your side. And I think, troubleshooting and all of these things, which certainly for the time I was preparing for the Desert Ultra, I felt quite on my own in all these decisions of what I should and shouldn't do. And I think coaching just gives you somebody on your side that kind of can bear the brunt of some of those decisions. So
fantastic. And I mean, that's not been the only development for you, has it? Don't talk about anything that you're going to mess up any contractual obligations or breach any NDAs with, but you have a running company behind you now as well, don't you?
Yes. So I have a shoe company. I think I can say it, can't I?
I don't know, you tell me. I'm pretty sure you can. It's in your Insta bio, so yeah, I think you can say it out loud.
So I mean, I've been a fan of ultra running shoes for a while now. I was wearing the Lone Peaks in the Desert Ultra. They're a really great shoe. I think you wear them too, Will, don't you?
Yeah, I've just been out before we started this. I'd just been out in my Ultra Lone Peaks to do a bit of a lunchtime run. Yeah, I really like them. I've got feet like shovels, so they're perfect for me.
But that's natural. That's what you should have. And actually, Vim was wearing ultra shoes as well in Namibia. So. But they're fantastic. So I was really pleased. I applied to be an ambassador for them, and they took me on. And so, I've got a small bit of sponsorship, and so I get to just keep wearing the shoes I love, but get some as well. And so that's a starting point. And obviously, I'm seeing where I can go with my running. But the realities of life is if I'm really wanting to kind of be able to step off. Maybe work part-time as a doctor and do running somewhat, then part of that will need to be sponsorship. So I'll look down those avenues and see if that can work. And, if not, I mean, I'll be running regardless one way or another. That's always going to be a part of my life. Just whether or not I can really, really put my foot on the gas in terms of competitions, races, that's still to be determined. But I mean, for the time being, I'm definitely giving it a go. So.
Well, that's really exciting. I mean, whichever way it goes, you've got a bright future running ahead of you, and I'm really pleased to have been able to be there in Namibia and watch you go through that event. That was a genuine privilege to see that. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for suffering through 250 kilometers of sand for us.
Thanks, Will.
Amazing. Well, Kasia, I'm not going to take up too much of your day, but
thank you for having me.
It's been brilliant to sort of relive all this and hear about this future that you've got set up ahead of you now. It's fantastic, and it couldn't happen to a more deserving runner.
Oh, thank you, Will.
No worries. Well, Kasia, you enjoy the rest of your day.
And you.
And I'll say hi to Adam Kimball for you.
Thank you.
Okay.